The late afternoon sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of a bustling Chicago street, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the sidewalk. A young violinist, no older than 16, stood near the corner of State and Madison, her delicate fingers coaxing a haunting melody from her weathered instrument. Her name was Clara, though no one in the small crowd knew it. Her music, a blend of classical and something rawer, something her own, floated above the city's hum, car horns, chatter, the clatter of footsteps. A battered violin case lay open at her feet, sprinkled with a few crumpled dollar bills and loose change. Her eyes were half closed, lost in the notes, her dark hair swaying slightly with each pull of the bow. The crowd was modest but attentive, tourists pausing with their shopping bags, a barista on break from the nearby coffee shop, an old man with a cane who tapped his foot faintly to the rhythm. They didn't know Clara's story. How she'd been busking since she was 12 to help her single mother pay rent, how the violin was a gift from a teacher who saw her talent, how every note she played was a small rebellion against a world that often felt too heavy. To them, she was just a fleeting moment of beauty in a city that rarely slowed down. Then came the disruption. A group of 4 men, reeking of cheap whiskey and louder than the traffic, stumbled out of a dive bar across the street. Their laughter was jagged, their steps unsteady. The biggest one, a guy with a patchy beard and a leather jacket too tight for his gut, zeroed in on Clara. "Hey, sweetheart, what's this noise?" he slurred, his voice cutting through her melody like a knife. The others snickered, egging him on. Clara's bow hesitated, but she kept playing, her eyes flicking nervously toward them. The crowd shifted uneasily. A woman clutching a shopping bag looked down at her phone. The barista turned away, pretending to check his watch. The old man with the cane shuffled back a step. No one wanted trouble. The men closed in, their voices growing louder, their taunts uglier. "Play something we know," one shouted. "What, you too good for us?" another jeered. Clara's fingers trembled, but she didn't stop. Her music was her shield, fragile as it was. Then it happened. The big guy, emboldened by the crowd's silence, lunged forward and snatched the violin from her hands. "Let's see how tough you are without this," he said, and with a sickening crack, he smashed it against the pavement. The wood splintered, strings snapping like broken promises. Clara gasped, her hands reaching out instinctively, but the men laughed, circling her now. "Got any cash to make up for that crap performance?" the leader demanded, stepping closer. The crowd stayed frozen, eyes averted, complicit in their inaction. But not everyone was watching from a distance. Leaning against a lamppost a few yards away, Jason Statham folded his newspaper with deliberate calm. He'd been there for a while, unnoticed, a man in a black leather jacket and jeans, his face half hidden under a cap. He wasn't here for the music, he'd just stopped to skim the headlines, but something about Clara's playing had caught his ear. Something about her courage, standing there alone, pouring her soul into the strings, had made him linger. Now, as the men's voices grew uglier and the crowd did nothing, his jaw tightened. He pushed off the post, his movements slow but purposeful, like a panther waking from a nap. The men didn't notice him at first, too busy intimidating Clara, who was now backed against the wall, her eyes wide with fear but defiance flickering beneath it. "Give me your case," the leader barked, kicking at the violin case, scattering the few dollars inside. Clara's voice, small but steady, cut through. "That's all I have. Just leave me alone." Jason was close now, close enough to smell the whiskey on them. "Oi," he said, his voice low, gravelly, carrying the kind of weight that made people listen. The men turned, startled. The leader squinted, sizing him up. "What's your problem, old man?" he sneered, puffing out his chest. Jason didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, his boots clicking softly on the pavement, and picked up a piece of the broken violin, a jagged shard of spruce, still attached to a snapped string. He held it up, turning it over in his hands, his eyes never leaving the leader's. "This," he said finally, "was hers. You're gonna pay for it." The crowd, still silent, began to stir. A few phones came out, recording. The men laughed, but it was nervous now. "You gonna make us, tough guy," one of them said, stepping forward. He was younger, wirier, with a mean glint in his eye. He swung a lazy punch, expecting Jason to flinch. He didn't. Jason sidestepped smoothly, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it just enough to make him yelp. With a quick pivot, he drove his elbow into the man's ribs, sending him staggering into his friends. The leader roared, charging forward, but Jason was ready. He ducked under a wild swing, planted a fist in the man's gut, and followed with an uppercut that dropped him like a sack of bricks. The other two hesitated, then rushed him together. It was over in seconds. Jason moved like he'd done this 1,000 times, a precise blur of blocks and strikes. One man caught a knee to the stomach, the other a sharp jab to the jaw. They crumpled, groaning, as the crowd gasped. Jason didn't break a sweat. He straightened, brushing his hands on his jeans, and turned to Clara. She was still against the wall, her breath shaky, but her eyes locked on him. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost gentle. She nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. Thank you." He crouched, picking up her violin case and the scattered bills. The crowd was murmuring now, some clapping, others whispering. A few stepped forward, suddenly brave, dropping more money into the case. Jason handed it to Clara, his expression unreadable. "This won't fix the violin," he said, "but it's a start." The leader, still on the ground, groaned and muttered something about calling the cops. Jason crouched beside him, his voice low and cold. "You do that. Tell em how you smashed a kid's violin and tried to rob her. See how that goes." The men shut up. Jason stood, scanning the crowd. "You lot," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority, "so what happened? You didn't do a thing. Next time, step up." A few faces flushed, but no one argued. He turned back to Clara. "You got somewhere safe to go?" She nodded, clutching the case. "My mom's waiting for me. I just wanted to play." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. But she didn't. She straightened, wiping her eyes. "Who are you?" Jason smirked, "Just a flicker. Just a guy who doesn't like bullies." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a worn wallet, and slipped a card into her hand. It had a number and a name, John. "You need help, you call. And get yourself a new violin. Something sturdy." Before she could say more, he was moving, blending into the crowd as sirens wailed in the distance. The men were still on the ground, nursing their bruises, as the crowd finally found its voice, some cheering, others helping Clara gather her things. She stood there, clutching the card, the weight of the moment settling in. Her violin was gone, but something else had taken root, a spark of hope, a reminder that even in a city that could feel so cold, there were people who'd stand up when it mattered. By the time the cops arrived, Jason was long gone, his newspaper left folded on the lamppost. Clara went home that night with enough cash from the crowd to buy a new violin, and a story she'd tell for years. The city kept moving, as it always did, but for one moment, on that cracked sidewalk, courage and kindness had cut through the noise, sharp as a bow on strings.